Hey y'all, welcome back to Chaos in the Paddock. My name is Isha Bajwa and I am taking over for Kiara because she is girl bossing at the DTM finale. With the Formula One race in COTA, Circuit de Americas in Austin, Texas for the USGP, we decided we're going to do a North American Chaos in the Paddock episode. So today we have our fellow American, Anna, aka Racing Rambles. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm back again for yet another rambling podcast. My name is Anna. I am Racing Rambles over on TikTok and Race Rambles on Instagram because I finally got around to making a motorsports Instagram. Not that it has anything on it currently.
And to keep up with the theme with North American, we have our resident Canadian, aka our neighbors to the north, Delta Tom. Introduce yourself.
Hello, back by popular demand. I am Tom, aka Delta Tom FP1 on TikTok. It's the same handle over on Instagram. I don't post on there right now. You can still follow me. I would appreciate it. But yeah, TikTok is where I do most of my magic.
And you can find me at Silly Little Racing on TikTok and Instagram, but also go follow Chaos in the Paddock. We post amazing stuff on there. We have predictions, we have race results, and we have silly little fun things we like to do during the week. So the first thing I want to talk about, especially it was a sprint weekend. So we first go into the sprint race. I definitely thought it was a precursor for the main race. We definitely saw elements of the sprint race in the main race we saw today. First thing I want to touch on is the Ferrari pace. Ferrari was one of two teams who didn't bring any upgrades, and they were able to keep up the pace and actually be faster because of more consistency with both the cars. With me and Anna both being really big Ferrari fans.
You can see in the background. Forza Ferrari, always.
Yeah, well, what do we think about just like this the pace of the Ferraris?
I was honestly a little worried coming into the weekend because obviously this was the first of the last six races of the year, the first of our two triple headers remaining. So I was a little worried with hearing all the upgrades coming in from all the other teams that it would set Ferrari on the back foot. However, as the weekend progressed, especially getting into the sprint weekend and seeing their extremely consistent, fast-paced pace, I stopped worrying as much as I kind of got into the frame of mind of, okay, they don't have any new variables coming into this weekend. They know their car. It's been the same car since Monza. So I had some hopes coming in after the only free practice session, but seeing their consistent pace and the fact that it didn't drop at all and they very easily maintained that third and what ended up being third and fourth, I don't want to say I was surprised, but I kind of pleasantly was, which is not the normal state of mind for a Ferrari fan in this day and age.
Any opinions on that, Tom?
Yeah, well, I think it was interesting because, again, kind of like you pointed out, they were one of two teams next to Williams that didn't end up bringing upgrades to this weekend. And a lot of people thought that was a pretty, I guess, like bold move considering like how close they are to Red Bull, and there still is some sort of appetite amongst Ferrari fans that they could battle for the actual World Constructors Championship. I think P2 is more realistic, and they should probably get that by the end of the year. But I think it's a vote of confidence from Fred, knowing that over these last few Grand Prix after they brought their big upgrade package in Monza, the car is good in low speed. It's also good in high speed and medium speed. It's basically just been the setup that's been rough with them. So hindsight is always a beautiful thing because if you look back on it now, you can actually consider that, all right, well, it's probably best that they bring an upgrade or they use this upgrade from Monza at a more, I guess, like traditional circuit that kind of offers a bunch of everything that Coda does. And they can actually work on perfecting that setup rather than bringing an upgrade and trying to, not only get a good setup from the previous upgrade and understand that, but then now have to deal with everything to do with a new upgrade. So I don't really think that the sprint race itself was kind of foreshadowing exactly what we would see in the actual Grand Prix now that we reflect back on it because Red Bull's upgrades looked good and they still did look good. We always knew Ferrari and McLaren would have like the better tire management. Um, But after like looking at all the data, it was like, yeah, Ferrari was really sort of like the sleeper pick for the win, and they were just a lot stronger than I think a lot of people had them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, a notable thing I want to talk about from the sprint race is the battle between Sergio Perez and Yuki Tsunoda, both Red Bull-owned teams, and with the news of there no being a extra point for fastest lap next year. I think that's something like I noticed with Red Bull and the Red Bull family, using the fastest lap to get not only get a cheap point, but to like take it away from other teams. Like put someone on the soft tires in the last lap and just bang out a quality lap. With this, I want to talk about Red Bull, the Red Bull family, and the fact that they have two teams, and if that's really fair in Formula One. I know it's kind of like a little detour in our conversation, but it's also something we should talk about given the news. There is no extra point for fastest lap.
I'm gonna let Tom take that one first. He's the resident Red Bull man over here.
Well, I understand the opinion for sure that a lot of people have with it being viewed as like a potential conflict of interest. I will say that ever since I got into Formula One in 2019, when they reintroduced the fastest lap, I always thought it never made sense. And even looking back on it, considering that out of the 122 Grand Prix that we've had since they've reintroduced it, there's only been 33 times that the winning driver has actually taken fastest lap. So it's a little disingenuous sorry, to call it like the fastest lap. I mean, it's the entertainment value, and that's why they brought it back. However, at the same time, Formula One, if you really want to look at it, is one big sport of conflict of interest. And I think you could still make a stellar case to say that like, well, Mercedes can kind of do the same thing with Williams because they supply Mercedes power to Williams, and Williams, at least up until this year, has always sort of been the sister team to Mercedes. Certainly from a technical aspect, like Haas has been more of a sister team to Ferrari than AlphaTauri was to Red Bull. Do I think it's unfair for one F1 team to own two, or one company to own two F1 teams? I mean, if we're going based on the actual rules, there's no real rule indicating that a company can't do that. I think that's something, people want to see them hamper down on in the new Concord agreement, is to solidify that, like one company can't own two teams. But then the conversation becomes like, okay, well, you can't really force Red Bull to sell the second team. For me, being the Red Bull fan that I am and the Diedrich Mateschitz loyalist, I always understood why the second team existed, which was to facilitate the young talent, right? So it looks like they're going back to that. In which case, if like I'm more in favor of it being on the grid if it's going to revert back to the junior team, if you will, versus if they just had it there to soak up like sponsorship dollars and just sort of be, I guess, like an inevitable retirement home for the likes of Daniel Ricciardo. And I don't know, maybe they put Valtteri Bottas there, something like that, if you understand what I'm saying. But there seems to be like the rediscovered purpose of why it existed in the first place when Diedrich bought it for, I believe it was €1, bought Minardi from Minardi. So yeah, it's controversial, but at the same time as well, it's there right now. There's no rule explicitly saying that one company can't own two teams. So it's a little complicated. I think I'm more in favor of it. Like I said, if it exists to be the junior team for Red Bull, I still think that there are going to be people that don't want Red Bull owning two teams. But I mean, agree to disagree, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess when it comes down to it, it is like you said, the sport's in one large group of conflict of interest. From what I've been seeing with the rumors coming out of, Liam Lawson, if he shows up and shows out enough, he'll end up with a V carb seat for next year. I think people are less inclined to be irritated about it as they're heading back towards the trend of, okay, it's a launching pad for the junior drivers, the way that it was with Carlos, the way that it was with Max, even if Carlos didn't end up staying with the Red Bull family. But yeah, you can't force them to sell the team. So yeah, say the Concord agreement comes down and they say, oh, one brand or one overarching parent company can't have two teams. what's it gonna end up coming down to? Like you said, they can't force them to sell the team. So do they write rules to where their drivers have to be rookies with 2 years or less of experience? And again, how do you implement that from an outside source? It's not like you can't have an FIA representative inside the team.
Yes, Tom, patiently raising his hand.
So I think the last thing that I'll just add on to it, and then I'll give you back the mic there, Isha. Thank you for being so generous. I think if there's one thing that Red Bull would do, and I've said this for a while now, to sort of work around any potential, well, you have to sell the second team. If the Ford partnership starts off on the good foot, and maybe they're not the best team, or they're a top four team, let's just put it that way. I think what could happen in a potential situation where like the FIA comes out and says, okay, Red Bull, you have to sell the second team. What I think they would do is sell it to Ford. And you would have like the Ford name on the grid and owning that team, but then of course they would still run Red Bull engines, and it would still operate, I think, in a similar fashion as the junior team. They may have like, a Red Bull seat, kind of the way that Alfa Romeo used to work, where they had like the Sauber seat and then the Ferrari seat.
Mm.
They would do that. They would have like a Ford seat and put somebody super marketable that they really like, and then have a Red Bull seat for a junior driver. That's what I could see happening. But again, I think when it comes to like a legality aspect, it'd be very hard for F1 and the FIA to go like, okay, Red Bull, sell the second team, because they can be like, no.
I mean, for me, as in the American Yeehaw, I find it unfair that one company can own two teams, with Andretti not being able to form a Formula One team to have an 11th team on the grid. Your face says it all. Do you have any
My
thoughts
my
on
my
that?
face does say it all. And I did want to bring up the point, the whole legality of the FIA or even Liberty Media stepping in and going, hey, Red Bull, okay, you have to sell this team. That's going to bring about the whole issue of, okay, Liberty Media is the marketing aspect of Formula One. It's not the governing body the way that the FIA is. So it's going to bring back those issues of or I guess the rumors saying that Checo Perez got his contract extension because Liberty Media kind of stuck their nose where it wasn't supposed to be with the marketing aspect of, losing ticket sales or sales across the board for the North American thing. But circling back around to the Andretti thing, and again with marketability, you're trying to break into the American market. That's why we have 3 races in the United States. That's why one of the reasons they added Miami. That's a major reason why they added Vegas, glitz and glam and a race under the neon lights. So why are you saying no to one of the biggest, most recognizable motorsports brands in the United States, especially someone who has won a Formula One World Championship under that name? If I am not wrong, I believe it was Mario Andretti, or at least has raced in the sport with Mario and Michael Andretti, so 2 generations. Why, if you're trying so hard to break into that market, are you ignoring a massive name like that? Something that's right up there with the Earnhardt family. Makes no sense to me.
I think it's two different conversations, really, because I'm with you though, for sure. Like I think Andretti being rejected on the grounds that they were is ridiculous. I've been pretty vocal about that. And I think certainly, as you pointed out, Anna, that like they're trying to break into the American market, like having Andretti on the grid only brings value to that. It's ridiculous that they think otherwise. But certainly when you're looking at everything that has sort of come out with Michael Andretti sort of stepping back and not leading the charge with it anymore, it could just be the fact that, Michael is such a divisive character that it could be that they don't want Andretti in Formula One on the premise that Michael Andretti is the one leading that charge. And
Mm.
they just, it was a way for them to force Andretti's hand to do this. So it could still very well be possible. Um, who knows though? So we'll have to wait and see on that. But
Ooh.
I do think it is different having Andretti on the grid versus like having two teams in Formula One. And it's unprecedented because we don't have this in any other sport. But Formula One is not any other sport. So
Right.
All
I
right.
did want to bring one more point on that whole Andretti thing, especially with Michael Andretti having stepped back from his role as CEO. Need we forget that Zach Brown was on that board up until recently? So if had he not left, that would have been a whole other conflict of interest had Andretti made it to F1. Because it's like, okay, he's the CEO of McLaren and not just McLaren in F1, but also in IndyCar and Formula E. But now he's got these very high level ties to another motorsports brand. And who knows if anyone's had caught that in IndyCar too and had issues with that. But I'm not quite as entrenched in IndyCar rumors quite yet as I am in F1.
Yeah, I feel like it's a whole conversation that we can dive into a lot deeper, and people probably have dived into a lot deeper. But now going back to the race weekend itself, we're going into qualifying. One thing that I was watching qualifying and I was really surprised by is Hamilton not making it out of Q1.
That's always wild to me when you see a man with that legend that far down. Like we were talking before we started recording, this is the fourth time he has started P19 in the entirety of his career spanning back to 2007. And it's the first time it's happened in the United States too. It just brings to mind what the heck is going on.
I feel like Mercedes within itself hasn't had a great weekend with Lewis not making it out of Q1, George crashing at the end of Q3, and Lewis Hamilton being beached at the start of the race. Um, could we chalk it up to a Mercedes issue or a driver skill issue?
Well, so there was a lot of, I guess, promise with Mercedes coming into this weekend because they were bringing up a significant upgrade package, and it just really didn't work, or they didn't have enough time to get it to work because, of course, George crashed in qualifying, and then they had to revert back to the old spec because they didn't have enough parts, right? In qualifying, like Lewis's qualifying was actually, no, the sprint qualifying, it was ruined because of the yellow flag. But in qualifying, he was dealing with a suspension issue. So the team fixed that. But I do think it sort of sheds light on the fact that a driver's success has a lot to do with the car. Like Lewis himself is one of the best drivers of all time, if not the best, like statistically his. But when you look at him and even the likes of Fernando Alonso, and even at times we've seen Max Verstappen susceptible to this, when they're in a difficult car and they don't have confidence in driving it the way that they usually do, they're only human at the end of the day. It's not as if they're going to be able to take, in Lewis's case, the fourth fastest car and win every single Grand Prix. Like that's just not realistic. It certainly was quick over one lap. Lewis could have gotten sprint pole position, but ultimately they suffered from tire issues, which is something they've been dealing with all season. The car is constantly on a knife's edge, which is why George and Lewis have had such a tough time dealing with it. And they have to do a lot of sort of tweaks within under like parc fermé conditions, going from like qualifying to the race and changing up the setup, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it really sort of just boils down to that. I think Lewis, it wasn't a fantastic weekend from him, but I wouldn't say it's 100% on him, nor would I say it's 100% on the car. But it does suck. It's his first time not making it to Q3 in America. So yeah, not good.
I fully agree with Tom on that. And I think depending on the weekend and depending on the circumstances and depending on the type of track, so street track, permanent track, has it been recently resurfaced like Coda has, the percentage of like driver error or car issue does kind of shift. And especially with how this year has gone, and with, Lewis being announced to go to Ferrari way back in February before the season even started, I think that's probably weighed more on his mind and his confidence than we've probably seen. Because again, the man is a 7-time world champion. So he does have the skill set and the knowledge to pull results out of the fourth fastest car that anyone barring maybe Max or Fernando would, purely on skill level and things like that. And I honest to God think it probably was, I'll ballpark it here, say 60% car, 40% Lewis, just because we saw with both Lewis and George having issues with the suspension, the rear, because Lewis had a very similar accident in the race, which I'm sure we'll get to, that George had that crashed him out at the end of Q3. So, honest to God, there's so many variables, but I'd say it's both in varying percentages. Lewis's mentality and coming with car issues, especially with how close to the end of the season we are. And he's probably, I don't want to say he's giving up, because obviously no one in their position as the top 20 races in the world are going to give up. Like, they're going to fight till the last, but mentally, physically, psychologically, and emotionally, it's going to weigh on them. And no matter what they do, that is going to affect their race.
I feel like when you talked about the 60-40 split, that's a really, really agreeable split between car and driver. How much can you blame on the car? How much can you blame on the driver? And as he said before, now we're going to go into his teammate, George Russell, crashing out. As the checker flag was waved in Q3, one thing I want to say is we could have a very, very different grid if George didn't crash out and Lando was quote unquote gifted pole position. How would you guys think this would have changed the outcome of qualifying and the race itself?
I don't, as much of a Max Glazer as I am, I don't want to say that Lando was gifted, because he obviously did enough on his first run to get that right. Like, he delivered when he needed to. Stuff like that happens, and
I'm not saying that he did get provisional pole. He did put in the fast lap at that point. But as George crashed out, Max was set to take provisional pole from Lando. So if that didn't happen, I feel like the entirety of the grid and the subsequent race itself would have been a lot different.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I mean, I think there are going to be people that will sort of say certain things to discredit Lando, and really vice versa for Max, Lewis, Charles, whomever. But what I would say is, things like that do happen. Max was up by like 4/10 in sector 2. So he definitely was on pace to absolutely destroy that lap. Um, but it is interesting to think about, because that would have meant, Max would have been on the outside starting in pole position, and then Lando would have been on the inside. And, as we have seen with Coda, generally being on the inside pays off going into the first turn. And yeah, maybe, I don't know if necessarily the results would have changed that much, because I think Ferrari just had overall the better car, but maybe we wouldn't have had Ferrari leading after the first turn, I think.
I I'm going to agree. I know I wasn't watching quali as close as I would have liked to. I was at work at the time. But I do remember seeing George's crash and Max's lap getting canceled, and he was, I know I saw at the very least a 10th up on that time. Very much so purple sectors. I don't think it would have changed anything from third back. I think we still would have had Carlos third, Charles fourth, Oscar fifth. But I think maybe at minimum we would have seen Max and Lando swapped. Would that have changed much of the results of the race itself? I don't think so, because I'm not 100% sure how many years it's been. But Coda has very rarely ever been won from pole. I mean, we saw that last year. We saw that this year with the winner that we will get to later, and I'm sure Isha and I will be very happy to discuss that. But yeah, I'm gonna agree with Tom. I don't think much would have changed in the way of quality results, because I think third back was pretty much set by that point. The biggest thing might have been a one driver swap in position.
Yeah. Now we're finally getting into the meat of the potatoes of this podcast, the race itself. Oh my God, this was so exciting. We got battles for the front, back, in the middle. I couldn't look away without missing anything. You know what I mean? I feel like something was constantly happening where I was actually scared to take a break. Following our conversation of turn one, the amount of joy I had at turn one when I just saw Charles Leclerc. I think he went on the inside
He took
of
the inside line.
yeah, he took the inside line between the tussle of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris and just took his opportunity. The genuine smile I had at that because I don't anything can happen at turn one, but I was just not expecting that between that happening because Lando Norris and Max Verstappen are in contention for the championship itself.
And with how crazy the length of the track is from the start finish line up to turn one with an over 100-foot elevation change into a blind hairpin, that could have been chaos. Like we saw it in the sprint going 3, 4 cars wide at that point. But no, I don't think anyone expected to see Charles Leclerc where Charles Leclerc ended up after turn one. I think all of us were so focused on Max and Lando because, again, they're the title contenders currently. So everyone is going to focus on them primarily for the rest of the season, wherever they qualify. That they're going to be the focus. And I will throw it out unless something astronomical happens or someone takes an engine penalty again. They're going to be in the top 10, period. But my body blue screened when I saw that. I literally just went Control Alt Delete restart, body shaking, just I'm sorry. What? What do you mean that's where Charles is? I want to be professional, but my little Ferrari Charles Leclerc fangirl heart was just exploding with happiness. But Jesus Christ, that just left me extremely anxious the entire rest of the race.
So many comments on us fangirling over Charlotte Claire's
Well,
first start.
the Red Bull fans sitting in the corner listening to the Ferrari fangirls.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to steal your thunder. I was just sort of, letting you enjoy your euphoria because I mean, I would be happy too. I was pretty happy with the race result as well. I think Max did everything that he could to secure P3. Um, and yeah, I mean, ultimately, again, at the end of the day, I think if you still had Ferrari on the second row, regardless of how Lando and Max started the race,
Mhm.
I still think it would have been a Ferrari win. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I just think that the car in general was the better race car. And yeah, they totally earned it. And now they're 8 points behind Red Bull for P2 in the constructors and Charles is 22 points behind Lando for P2 in the drivers. Meanwhile, Lando is now 57 points behind Max, and he was 52 points going into this weekend. So the battle really is for P2 in both the drivers and the constructors.
Yeah.
Unless of course like Max goes on um an absolute
Tender of a
clanger.
win.
Yeah, an absolute clanger from here on out and like does a whole bunch of DNFs.
If
But
he
even
pulls
then,
a 2023,
Yeah, there's
well, I mean, I would personally say like I think that this race was the most important race, at least from what it's setting up for the rest of the way. This was the most telling race for the rest of the season, because whoever came out on top, I think that it's ultimately it would be like the bellwether for letting us know who would win the drivers' championship, because Max can essentially DNF twice, and if Lando even gets fastest lap, then he's still up by what, 5 points? So, he's got two races in hand essentially, which is massive. So it's not impossible, but Lando basically has to outscore Max by 12 points from here on out. So he had to outscore Max by 8 or 9 going into this weekend. Now he has to do it by 12. It's not impossible, but just with 5 races left, it's much, much harder. So with Ferrari's momentum, I think the real battle would be Charles versus Lando for P2.
yeah.
I
And the
don't
short,
remember who I mentioned it to, but the consistency is what's going to help Red Bull. Or not Red Bull, my bad. Sorry. Tom, you're starting to convert me here a little bit. Is what's going to help Ferrari because I think I was talking to a mutual friend of ours when I said consistency is what wins championships in a
yes,
season like this. We're not
yes,
talking about Max's runaway season in 2023. I likened it to Kimi Räikkönen in 2007 because much like then, everybody was focused on Fernando and Lewis. That was the title fight. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, is this rookie in Lewis Hamilton going to beat the, at the time, reigning world champion Fernando Alonso? Very much so is everyone's thinking, oh, is Lando finally going to pip a championship off of Max? Where Kimi Räikkönen was just lurking in the background in that Ferrari, getting some consistent finishes. But once again, I'm going to agree with Tom that this was the weekend that was probably the most pivotal going into the rest of the season because it sets the tone for Red Bull and McLaren. Because up until this point, there had been maybe a fluctuation of 1 point in the gap between Max and Lando since I believe it was Imola. And now that gap has widened just a little bit. But in Lando's case, you can't miss those points here and there. The 1 point he missed in the sprint, and now the 5 points he's missed today are extremely important.
Yeah, and even if you look at the sprint, the statistics after the sprint race yesterday, Max has outscored Lando since Miami of this year, which is kind of crazy to think about, because Lando and McLaren have been on such a meteoric rise. You wouldn't think, and so it just goes back to what you were saying, Anna, that consistency wins championships, and even though Max hasn't won an actual Grand Prix since Spain, he's been consistent. The car has been giving him issues, but he's still been able to maximize that package, which I think is, you could probably even say, like, if he wins the title this year, it might be his most impressive title win. I might beg to differ, but it would definitely be up there for sure. Maybe second most impressive, just based on showcasing. All right, he has the second, third fastest car, but he's still managing to do what he needs to do weekend, like race to race. He's managing to be able to do what he needs to do essentially.
100%. And I'm also wondering, harkening back to mentality, what this is going to do with Lando's confidence in himself and his confidence in the team. Because I don't know if I was the only one that heard his radio after the 5-second penalty was passed down, going, oh, maybe I should have just gone behind him then. Should he have taken that strategy call into his own hands, the way we saw Charles kind of do earlier in the race when they were talking about plan A, B, or C, the way we saw Carlos do in Singapore last year, keeping Lando in his DRS to back George up? Should Lando have made the decision himself to, okay, I'm going to give this position back immediately, still stay in Max's DRS and try and overtake at a later time? Like, he's still got the black and white flag for track limits, because I was watching on the live timing screen on the F1 app. He still got noted for that. So there was still a very high chance that he would have ended up with a penalty. But I think it just kind of got compounded one on top of the other with the fact that, in my opinion, Max was ahead at the apex of that turn. What would have happened had he taken that decision into his own hands and not had the team say, no, you stay where you are?
Yeah, so basically the reason for that penalty is, if you look at Lando's onboard in conjunction with the reasoning from the stewards, basically the stewards deemed it that that Max had the lead going into the corner. Lando went off, but so did Max. And also Lando would have gotten a 5-second penalty for track limits, but because of the fact that Lando also had nowhere else to go, they didn't give him the track limits penalty. But Lando still did overtook Max off the track, and that's where he gained the advantage. So that's where the 5-second penalty played itself or came into effect. So whether people disagree with it or agree with it isn't the point. That's just what the reasoning was.
Yeah.
So when you look at the onboards to go along with what the steward said, it does make a lot more sense. And yeah, you're right. I think had Lando just given that place back and then overtook Max, we wouldn't have that conversation. So, but again, I mean, I can only imagine the emotions in the actual cockpit.
Yes, Anna.
Right. I was watching for the first time ever. I don't usually watch the post race shows because I watch from the F1 TV feed, not the F1 International feed. I believe it was Will Buxton and James Hinchcliffe brought up the fact it's like, okay, If Lando kept that position in front of Max, he should have put his foot to the floor, full throttle, and tried to gain that a 5 second gap. Do I think he would have been able to manage that with, I think, 4 or 5 laps left in the race? I know it was 6 or less at that point, but yeah, it's difficult. He could have tried, and then the 5 second penalty wouldn't have done anything. But who's to say at that point it wouldn't have compounded? Because obviously we saw the precedents set throughout the race with Pierre Gasly getting a 5 second penalty for track limits, Yuki Tsunoda getting a 5 second penalty for track limits, Oscar Piastri got a black and white flag right towards the end for track limits. So I guess either or, whether you say, oh, Max was ahead at the apex, or he pushed Lando off, Lando gained the position off the track, there was the precedence for him to get a penalty either way, in my opinion, at least.
I think for me, that whole battle between Verstappen and Norris, I think it was just a masterclass of defense.
You're not wrong with, oh, Jesus, how many laps did it take Lando to get to that point? Because Max was just undercutting him off. I saw that gap go from 99 thousandths of a second up to 6/10ths of a second and just constantly fluctuating. So yeah, 100% a masterclass in defense.
I think Lando Norris was able to gain on top of Max Verstappen with his newer tires on around lap 36, but I don't think it was until lap 44 where that battle for P3 actually came into effect. It reminds me of, I'm forgetting what race it was. It was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix where Leclerc tried to get on Piastri at turn 1, and it kept going on for laps and laps and laps, and it felt like whenever Charles had an opportunity to get on Oscar always was defending or didn't have enough space between the two of them to fully overtake. It just brought me straight back to that point in Baku. I just felt like the entire time. I don't know. I also feel for Lando trying so hard to get on top of Verstappen, because it kind of feels like, for me, if I'm trying so hard to overtake someone for that long period of time, I can kind of forget not the basics, but to keep track limits or just keep the rules, quote unquote, in the back of my mind because I'm so focused on getting ahead. That is
it gets complicated.
Yeah.
100%.
I think if you go,
yeah,
I think if you actually go back, and you watch that battle unfold, it's really in sector 1 in the S's there. That's literally where Max was able to pull out just enough of a gap to Lando. And I think it's a testament to just how different their style is. And I think Lando would be a lot better if he just made his corner entries just tighter and shorter, because that's literally what separates, I think, some of the better drivers on the grid, such as Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen, being the shorter corner drivers, to an extent Oscar Piastri, where Lando doesn't have that quality in him. But yeah, if you go back, every single time they came out of the S's in sector 1, Max pulled out just enough of a gap to make it harder for Lando to overtake him in DRS, because the McLaren had the advantage going into the DRS zones, but Max was just able to, all right, I'm going to be able to pull out just enough to put myself in a good defensive position going into or coming out of the DRS zones, to make it harder for Lando. So that's literally where Max made his defense, quite frankly.
I agree with that one. Lando has the speed, but like we said, he doesn't have his corner entrances, and maybe specifically in this case, his high speed corner entrances down on lock the way that Max does. So it's, in this case, I want to say it's not a matter of speed, it's a matter of skill and knowledge, because Max knows how to do that and he can consistently execute that. Whereas Lando still has to work on things like that. So Max had that advantage of skill and knowledge to keep pulling just enough of a gap to keep ahead of Lando.
One point I really want to bring up about this race, this was the first race we saw a safety car since Canada.
Welcome back, safety car.
Welcome
I
back,
think
safety car.
I'm pretty sure I said that out loud. And it's just like, oh, it's been a hot second since we've seen the Aston Martin safety car. Because I honest to God was wondering, because I saw Lewis's back tires spinning and spinning and spinning, and I'm thinking to myself, is he going to get enough traction to get himself, back on track? Or I don't know if there's an escape road back there. I honest to God wasn't paying attention. And then I saw that little Aston Martin logo and that type font pop up over the yellow flag, and I went, we have not seen you in a while, Burt Mylander. Welcome
Burt
back.
Mylander really, really reminding us why he's there.
As opposed to in the MotoGP free practice this weekend, seeing as Claire over at F1 Dolls is not on the podcast this weekend, I have to bring up MotoGP at least once a podcast. They got rained out in Australia, so we saw the safety car on track the most, drifting and doing laps and almost ending up in the barrier multiple times because he kept losing the rear of the car. So it was nice to see Burt Mylander back in the F1 safety car on a dry track.
My dream job is to be like the safety car passenger and
Yes.
just have the aux the whole time. Like, could you imagine you're playing like J. Cole or The
No,
Weeknd or something like that? Just
no.
complete vibes in the safety car.
Harkening back to the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, you got to be blaring AC/DC's Thunderstruck.
Yes,
No,
Going
not
around the
yes,
track.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Come
The
on,
two
Tom.
Americans.
Bring in the
Thunderstruck
Americana.
could be one of our national anthems.
But
Honestly, yeah.
if I'm DJing in the safety car and we're at Coda, there's not a chance that Shania Twain wouldn't be played in there because as a Canadian and somebody that also doesn't like country music, Shania Twain gets the pass.
Shania Twain always gets a pass.
Oh, she always gets the
It's
best.
Shania Twain. Let's
That's
go,
what I mean.
girls. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear that blaring out of the safety car is just the hook. Let's go, girls. And then just takes off up that 100-foot elevation.
But that's my dream job is to be like the safety car passenger because what else is he doing? He's literally just playing tunes.
He's being
F1, if you
passenger
somehow
princess.
listen to this, he is the passenger princess. F1, if you're somehow listening to this, Delta Tom FP1 wants a job application, so send one his way.
I feel like if okay, this is a great question. A little bit of a tangent. If you were to play a song as Burt Mylander in the safety car, what would it be?
Ooh.
That depends on the circuit. It would change.
Well, let's stick to Coda, seeing as this is the first time. Okay, here. Coda and Canada. Those are the two most recent safety cars. What's your song? Tom, you're going first because I have to think about this.
Okay, so for Coda, it's definitely Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain. Like it has to. And then for Canada, I think it's got to be like a Canadian artist. It would probably be Drake. And I would probably put God's Plan, considering that like I use that song so much in association with my boy Liam Lawson, who I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Every
So
other video I see from you has hashtag God's plan on it.
yeah, because Liam Lawson is God's plan. That's the whole shtick.
Oh, jeez.
Wait, I got a perfect one. I think for anything, you have to go with Chapel Rowan. Super graphic, ultra modern girl. Oh
Okay.
my God, that's my get out of bed hype song. It's because like no one can be a super graphic, ultra modern girl like me. Like, let's be so real. Like, you guys
This is
have
very
to listen
true.
to this song.
I think that's one of Chappell Roan's I haven't listened to yet,
Okay.
to be honest.
Okay, for a more common Chapel Rowan song, I'm gonna go with either Red Wine Supernova
Oh, love that one.
or Feminine.
I feel like it has to be Feminine Phenomenon. Tom is very confused down there. No,
I mean, yeah,
I'm going to stick with Queen for Canada, specifically for Canada. I feel like for some reason, just in the rain with the gloom, has to be We Will Rock You. because that's just a classic. You're blaring it through the speakers. And actually, I don't know if any of you guys ever scroll through the F1 Instagram stories, but they do like a playlist every weekend for the tracks that they're at. And the artist of this particular song was actually at Coda this weekend. His name is Shabuzi. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He has a song called A Bar Song,
Oh,
parentheses,
I know what you're talking
Tipsy.
about. I know what you're talking about. It
He was
was.
there. He has the really thick, I don't want to say they were, I want to say they were, I don't know if they were dreads or locks, but he has very recognizable hair. It's a song that took off on TikTok and it was just very heavily featured this weekend. And I feel like it's a kind of a country song, but not. I actually think you would probably like it, Tom, because it's not super country, but it does have those vibes. And it just very much so fits Coda to me. I can't explain it
Mhm.
exactly, but it does. So I'll go We Will Rock You for the safety car in Canada and A Bar Song by Shabuzi for Coda.
All right, that was a great little tangent. I love that.
Yeah. All right, I want to bring something up though. Now that we're back onto the nitty-gritty of the race. So many people that were asked about strategy calls for the race this weekend were all saying it's hot, it's a new surface, it is rough, it has not been smoothed out or worn down at all. This is going to be a two-stop race. I'm sorry, I saw some of those tires go 38 laps, Mr. Colapinto, before he pitted the first time. And I'm just like, Jesus. And then the more I heard Charles go, no, we're sticking with plan C, we're sticking with plan C, I kept thinking, are they trying to pull a Monza on us again with a one stop? And lo and behold, what worked for both Ferrari cars? I know for 100% certainty, I wasn't focusing on many other teams at this race, but I still cannot believe they managed to pull off one stops as many times as they did across the grid. I honestly, I did not think it was going to work.
You know who else did a one stop and scored points?
Is it your boy Liam Lawson?
Sure
As
is.
I see the lovely t-shirt you're wearing of the Liam Lawson fan club.
President and founder of the Liam Lawson fan club, everybody.
Yes.
Well, first of all, frick yeah, I am. That's common knowledge at this point. I am the founder and president of the Liam Lawson fan club. And what a fantastic, I guess, re-debut for my boy. Like
I'd say a
the
re-debut.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the sprint was okay. It was scrappy, but I think overall like he did fine. And then in qualifying, he went P3 in Q1 and was basically like hold that. And then in the race itself, starting from, like back in
Seven?
Azerbaijan, like
Yeah.
I mean he had like a 60 place grid penalty. Guy has an amazing start by the way, and then goes all the way up and is in the points, battling in the points, makes the one stop work. Like unreal, unreal. So I was incredibly moist, literally, because I sweated through like my entire shirt.
I saw that picture. Um, he also, I want to say props to him for after his whole tussle with Fernando Alonso, tussling multiple times with Fernando Alonso
On and off
and
track.
serve on and off track, but in this case, on track during the race and surviving it and still holding those points. Because for someone that this is his first race back at a track he has not raced at before, he did bang on, absolutely stunningly amazing. Like the kid deserves the points he got. Those were hard-earned points, well-earned points as well. And I don't even really pay attention to V-Carb all that much. Though I will say I'm a little disappointed he didn't choose 95 as his racing number. Mr. Anthropomorphized Lightning McQueen over here.
Yeah, it's such a missed opportunity there. I think you would get all of Gen Z on your side if you had race from
I
both.
think he's already got a good chunk of Gen Z on his
He's
side
got
with
a pretty good
his
chunk of Gen
social
Z,
media
but
presence.
some older Gen Z, the ones who got in through Daniel Ricciardo, are still a little bit
That's
salty.
always going to be a conscientious point when it comes to it. But like F1, there's only 20 spots. You get an opportunity, you grab it.
Yeah, it's
You
very
take it with
true.
both hands, you don't let it go.
That's very
That's
true.
But
been my whole
also,
that's been my whole feud is just fighting with like millennials my age that are big Daniel
oh
Ricciardo
yeah,
yeah, like
Mm,
just big Daniel Ricciardo fans. That's literally been it. And every single like reply I've sent to them today has just been mic drop because it's like
yeah.
there are still the some that are just trolling for the sake of trolling and going like, yeah, but Daniel would have done better. It's like, okay, dude, whatever.
now hopping off the Liam Lawson conversation, I want to talk about another rookie, Franco Colapinto. He ended P9. Yes, no,
Yes.
P10, P10,
He was P10.
P10. What
What
an
a
amazing,
dude.
yeah.
For having, much like Liam, it having been his first appearance here at Coda, on again a brand new resurfaced track, so there was no tire data for him to go off of. The man ending P10, once again being in the points, is some serious, serious skill. And I honest to God hope he ends up with a seat next year.
One point I do want to bring up on lap 23, Franco, he made a move against Fernando Alonso and something that the Sky Sports broadcasters, Crofty and Ted, they were both talking about how it was the least experienced driver on the grid against the most experienced driver on the grid. And I feel like the fact if you're in Formula One, you obviously proved you can overtake and make the moves when you need to. But that was such a
It,
pivotal moment
it's
for
also the oldest driver on the grid versus the youngest driver on the grid.
that is so true.
Franco Colapinto is 21 years of age. So not only is it least experienced and most experienced, it is oldest versus youngest. And guess who won out in that battle? I will drop a quote. Youth and innovation sometimes does trump age and experience. So just saying. The man showed up and showed out when he needed to. And out qualified his teammate. And out finished his teammate. But say because yeah, they were I want to say 16th and 17th in the race. When or not in the race, in qualifying. And ended up 10th and 16th. Quote me on that if I'm wrong. Or don't quote me on that if I'm wrong. But the fact it was experience and age, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Colapinto, seriously, as much as I hate the context in which Colapinto did get his seat, again, it's a lot like Liam, take your opportunity when you get it. The man is making the most out of his opportunity. And he's doing
100%.
it with style and building a serious, I don't want to say fandom, I'll say fan base around himself. He's extremely likable and extremely marketable. And he's a very well put together package in someone who is not very media trained.
One thing I do want to say, when we got the news that Logan Sargent was going to be replaced, I think everyone was surprised about Franco Colapinto being his replacement.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone wanted Mick to replace him
Mm-hmm.
at Williams, or that was like what was expected. I feel like he well and truly proved himself over the course of the amount of races he's been in and what he's been able to do against a more experienced driver at the same team than Logan Sargent, who had a year and a half to show what he can do.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I've been a big Logan fan, but I think putting my bias aside, he had to go. Um, there was no reason to keep him on, especially with that weekend in Zandvoort. And Colapinto certainly was surprising. There was the conversation there about Liam Lawson going to Williams, but of course Red Bull said no because they may need to use Liam, and in which case they did. But yeah, I like Franco has been kind of like a revelation, I suppose. And I think it would be a crime if Sauber didn't just wait until the end of the season to secure like their final seat. It does still seem as though like Valtteri is the favorite there. Mick Schumacher has re-entered the conversation with like the difficulties that Valtteri is I guess like providing for the team. But I think if you're Sauber, like just wait until the end of the year. You have all the time in the world. and see what Franco can do. And also, I think Franco is a good option for Red Bull to look at as well, because if they do replace Yuki with either Liam or, sorry, if they do replace Sergio with either Yuki or Liam, then certainly like what they can do is fill that other Racing Bull seat with Franco, because I think Isaac Hadjar needs a full season as a reserve driver before he actually goes into Racing Bulls, and then yeah, you kind of go from there. I think that would be a real solid move, just in my opinion.
Yeah.
I will 100% agree with that. Regardless of the whole Red Bull situation, Franco, and I will say Liam also, again, after today, are making huge cases for themselves as to why not only do they deserve a seat on the F1 grid next year, or in 2026 if Franco ends up pulling a full year as a reserve driver, heaven forbid he doesn't get a seat next year, but also why they deserve one. They've earned it.
Yeah.
Those skills, and if they keep up with anything close to a level of consistency with what they showed us today over the next 5 races, it would be stupid for teams to not, at the very least, highly consider them. And obviously, yeah, like you said, Sauber and VCarb, as the 2 remaining seats on the grid that we don't know, can take until next year to have those seats filled. I think we all get so used to seeing all the seats filled by the end of silly season, which for most people it's the end of the F1 summer break in that lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that they can take as long as they need to fill those seats, as long as it is filled by preseason testing of the following year. So they can take their time, but they seriously need to consider Franco and Liam for those open seats, regardless of how the contract ends up working. So
I feel like someone who's very excited to see rookies for a full year in 2025. Right now we have Kimmy, we have Jack, we have Ollie. Those are the official 3 confirmed. And
yes, Jack Doohan for Alpine, Ollie Behrman for Haas, and Kimi Antonelli for Mercedes.
Yes. So we have those 3 drivers confirmed, and it's most likely going to be Liam Lawson's keeping his seat at VCarb, and a possible Franco Colapinto seat at Sauber. That's what the rumors are circulating towards. I feel I'm very excited to see new rookies in for the 2025 season. I honestly want to bring back the rookies of 2019. I just want to bring back the chaos and the excitement and like the silly goofiness of that.
If we get that, that's a quarter of the grid next year.
Yeah.
That's rookies. Not only would that bring some interesting racing in the back and in the midfield, I'd like to see some marketing a la George, Lando, and Alex from 2019. Because I think that's one of the reasons that they're beloved the way that they are.
Yeah.
I guess technically Franco and Liam would not be rookies next year. Like Liam's not a rookie right now.
But like for a full year.
Yeah, like rookie I know, in the sense of it being the full year or their first full year.
I'm with you. Like I would consider it that. I guess in the like by definition, just me being actually, it's more than you have to do 2 or more than 2 Grand Prix. Yeah, more than 2 Grand Prix, and then you're not a rookie anymore.
I thought it was 3.
Yeah, I thought it was 3 too.
That was a lot.
Yeah, if you do 3 Grand Prix, then you're not a rookie. So you have to do more than 2 Grand Prix. If you do 2 or less, then you're not. Then you're still a rookie. So Ollie is like just on the cusp because he did 2 this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll technically have 3 rookies, but I'm with you. I would still count like Franco and Liam because they haven't done a full season as rookies.
One thing I do want to bring up, and I think it's a quote from Oscar Piastri: "Clean air is king." And that's something we definitely saw in the race, and especially the sprint race. In the sprint race, especially with Max Verstappen being able to hold on to P1 and using that clean air to his advantage. Also, Charles Leclerc using being at P1 for most of the race, able to create those big gaps between him and Max on the first stint, so Ferrari could complete the undercut in a safe distance with Max and Carlos. But also the gap he was able to maintain with Charles and Carlos closer to the end of the race, keeping that Ferrari 1-2. We can all talk about upgrades if they work, if they didn't, what's more stable, what isn't. But I feel like this season, clean air is definitely king. What are your guys' thoughts about that?
I agree 100%. I'm still working on gaining my technical and wheel knowledge when it comes to things like that. And usually we'll hear about it being dirty air. Like, obviously, you're not getting a clean slipstream. And yes, when you're out in front, obviously, you don't have a slipstream. But when you are the lead car, you don't have to worry about that. Overall, it just makes a driver's life easier as long as you're the driver in front and not the one chasing them and trying to overtake them. And I guess, yeah, when it comes down to it, simplicity is best in saying just clean air is where you want to be. Whether that's on one side of the grid in the start, so overtaking, taking one line or the other, getting out ahead of all those cars and getting into the clean air, or just gaining a race lead and being in clean air, it's just where you want to be.
Yeah, at the beginning of 2022, the cars were able, these ground effect cars were able to follow a lot closer, where we've kind of come to a point it's more representative of like the 2021, 2020, like the end of that, the end of the
Yeah,
turbo hybrid era, where it's harder to actually follow the car in front, and it's just a reflection of like how the cars, I guess like work through the air and produce the dirty air from behind. I think also it depends on the track itself, because what we were able to see today was that the DRS was actually quite powerful, despite it not being um, as long as some other tracks. It was quite effective. So I think like following behind the cars wasn't as detrimental as it usually is. But then also just the likes of McLaren and Ferrari having the stronger tire deg. If the racing was closer and if you actually had like McLaren versus Ferrari at the front for the whole race, would things have changed? Not sure, but yeah, like clean air is king. And then also you have somebody like Charles who is super underrated when it comes to tire management. Um, it's going to be hard to catch him.
for sure. Oh, I just had a point I was trying to think. I also wonder if the type of circuit also affects, clean air and dirty air. But I do
Oh,
remember
100%.
the statistic they said DRS was worth 6/10 of a second. So yes, especially on a permanent circuit, on a wide open plains, the way that Circuit of the Americas is, I don't think dirty air is as detrimental, like Tom said. And following in that isn't as detrimental as it could have been, like it was for 2020, 2021, 2022 cars. But 6/10 of a second on DRS advantage is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So that definitely changed a lot of people's races. Today was realizing, hey, this DRS is actually super effective, and then having the skills to take that advantage and apply it to passing the cars or maintaining a lead, depending where on the track they were and what they, I guess, were getting up to at the time. But I definitely think there's a huge difference between like the DRS advantage somewhere like Baku, which is a tighter, twistier street circuit where you've got those walls kind of buffering things down,
Yeah.
versus at a wide open track like Coda where it can disperse a lot quicker, especially with cars constantly punching through the air.
Yeah.
I'd never thought about that before, actually, the type of circuit affecting how dirty air affects the cars. I'll have to look into that.
I feel like it's also like not the type of circuit, it's also the climate. Because if we go somewhere towards the Middle East where it's a lot more sandy, sand can be kicked up into the air a lot easier in affecting the car's performance and that stuff of having clean air. I don't know the true science behind that. I am not a natural science person. CS major, all my engineering is typing.
Yeah, we have a Tesla guy, a STEM major, and a hospitality major on the podcast today. So none of us are natural science majors. Sorry, Tom,
Yeah.
I relegated you to a Tesla guy.
No, he is. He is.
I am the Tesla guy, I guess. Yeah.
He's the
He
one
did
person who
drop he
actually
did drop
thinks that
some Tesla truck knowledge on us recently. about their cameras, even though I still think the Cybertrucks are atrocious.
Yeah. I feel like
But that's personal.
final thoughts, predictions for the rest of the season. I feel like, as Tom alluded to before, this race definitely showed what the ending of the season could most likely possibly be. What are your predictions for the rest of the season as we go into the last 5 races of the 2024 season?
I'll let Tom go first on this one because I got a little thinking to do if Tom's ready.
I think I think it depends on each race. I think Brazil is going to be a McLaren like powerhouse win. Because I still think that they're the most balanced car, and they should still be viewed as the favorites going into every single weekend. But I think Brazil is probably going to be like a slam dunk victory for Lando, both in the sprint and in the actual Grand Prix. Um, I think Mexico should probably still be like Max should still probably outscore Lando there because Max actually has the most wins around Mexico. He does very well there. And then we move into Vegas. Vegas could honestly be Ferrari. I think really it's just going to be the temperature. Like if they can get their tires like up to temperature appropriately and quickly, they should be able to win that because it's going to be quite similar to Monza. Um, Qatar, Qatar's tough. I would probably still give the edge to McLaren on that one. And then Abu Dhabi, I think by the time we get to Abu Dhabi, we'll have a pretty strong sense of Max is more or less going to be champion. And I wouldn't be surprised if Max ends up taking the win there because he does well around Abu Dhabi too. And then I think for lineups, I also think by Abu Dhabi we'll have a clear indication on like who's going to Sauber. And I still think when the dust settles, Valtteri will stay on for another year. And then I think Sergio will just do enough to stay at Red Bull for next season, and then Liam Lawson will get confirmed for Racing Bulls probably before Abu Dhabi, quite frankly, maybe even afterwards. But yeah, I don't know. It might be a little dull. I would love to see Liam Lawson or Yuki get promoted to Red Bull, and then they bring in Franco to race alongside the either one of them. But just thinking realistically, that's what I got.
All right, I guess I'll go next. Going into Mexico, I'm going to say, yeah, that'll still be Red Bull. Like you said, Max has the best kind of understanding with the amount of wins he's had around that track. I don't think anything has changed much at the track. I don't think anything's been resurfaced or gravel traps or runoffs have been added and or changed. I will say, yeah, I'll agree Brazil will probably still be McLaren. I'm going to say both. I'm going to give Qatar to be a kind of an up in the air. I think it'll depend on what everything looks like getting to that track because we always know that Qatar, especially after last year with how horrible that was, it's very Singapore-esque with how much it affects the drivers physically outside of the G-force aspect of the car. So I will give that a wild card. That'll be my wild card race for the rest of the season. I never thought about Vegas being similar to Monza, but you're not wrong about that. So I'll say even if Ferrari doesn't end up winning the race, and again, no one thought that they would win today. We thought they'd do very well today. I don't think any of us ever had them down for a win. But I'd say they'll be the strongest one heading there. And I'd honestly say I think Max will have the championship by Vegas if it doesn't go down to a last race victory. However, I'm going to spice it up when it comes to standings. I'm going to say Ferrari's going to take P2 pretty early. I'll say we'll probably have that by Qatar or Vegas, especially with the fact that they've been pretty consistent. I don't think they're going to bring any major upgrades. Maybe that flexi wing upgrade that we heard bantered around for Austin, but they never ended up bringing, which would kind of bring them up to par with Mercedes and McLaren. Yeah, I think we'll have that set pretty early. I think McLaren will probably have the constructors down pat pretty early too. And I think before Abu Dhabi, Max will have the constructors set. I think Sauber will still probably be up in the air by that point, especially if like Franco continues to do well and if Mick stays in the conversation. I I'll say Checo will probably stick around for another year. He'll stick through 2025, but he'll have, the blade of the guillotine on the back of his neck that if he drops off quickly in the beginning of next year, he will be replaced. That will be a mid-season swap next year if he sticks around. But beyond that, I'll say Charles Leclerc P3 in the drivers' standings. I'm not going to say anything crazy and think he'll overtake Lando unless something absolutely insane happens. But the drivers and the constructors in the top three are insanely close at the moment. So
I feel like for me, if you've listened to this podcast before, my predictions are very delulu and very much are based on my loyalties and where I want things to happen, not based on any sort of logic or anything. But with it being so close to the end of the season, I am going to say the driver standings are going to stay as they are. Max will get his fourth world championship. Lando will end up P2 and Charles will end up P3. I think with the constructors, the way McLaren and Ferrari are so close between each other, it can honestly go either way. Me personally, I still don't have the greatest of wheel knowledge in between each distinctive track and which teams can do better at what track. But I honestly think P2 for the constructors can go anyway between Red Bull and Ferrari. I feel like McLaren is going to stick with its P1 and get the constructors championship because the way both Lando and Oscar have been performing, I feel like if Checo was performing at kind of closer to the same level as Max, the constructors championship could be a little bit different. Yeah, as in for like seats for 2025, I really want to see more rookies on the grid, especially with the 2024 silly season, at least for the start of this season, we weren't able to get any rookies. I always like to see new blood on the track. So I'm hoping that Liam Lawson keeps his seat at Sauber. No, I hope that Liam Lawson keeps his seat at VCarb and Franco Colapinto gets that seat in Sauber. You both brought up Checo Perez, so I feel like I should. I feel like if he's gonna stay the way he is now, I think he's still gonna go into 2025. But if he's gonna perform the way he is now, he is gonna get super subbed. I don't know where in the season, but I think he's gonna get super subbed by, I hope, Yuki. Yuki has shown that he could put in the results when he needs to, and I feel like it's finally time for him to be at a more elevated team than VCarb. Any final thoughts for you guys?
Do we want to bring up the red nail theory?
Oh yeah, you're so right.
So Tom, the red nail theory is actually more of a theory of attraction, that if you had red nails, you are more confident and you draw more attention, and thus things generally go your way. One of the last times that I did not have red nails was after Monaco. And we all know how that string of races went for Charles. The minute I got red nails back, he started doing better, and then Monza happened. And as such, I am not allowed to have non-red nails until after December 8th. Because every time your girl has red nails, and they're red shiny nails too this time around, Charles Leclerc does really, really well. And Ferrari as a whole generally does really well. In addition. So
I feel like we can all have our superstitions with us either wearing the merch of our favorite driver in hopes that they do well, or just doing a pre-race routine to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible for what you want to see in the race. The red nail theory is very much scientifically there.
Yeah, it seems to keep happening, because this is the third time this year that I have read red nails and Charles Leclerc has won a Grand Prix. So Isha likes to constantly bring that up, that, hey, Anna, you have red nails. Look what happened.
My superstition is now you having red nails, because you having red nails led to Liam Lawson scoring points.
And Liam Lawson is the anthropomorphized version of Lightning McQueen, who, what color is Lightning McQueen?
Red.
Crazy, he's red.
Crazy.
There you go.
Know? So yeah, you need to keep your red nails because Liam needs to score more points. And geez, at this point, Liam Lawson podium maybe. Let's go.
I mean, if the Haas's can get their best result in the United States and one of their best results flat out, period, I'm not gonna rule it out.
One thing I do miss is the free burritos if Haas are in the points from Chipotle, the promo they had last year.
Haas is good at marketing.
Haas is really good at marketing.
But
At
yeah,
least in that sense.
as we're gonna close out the podcast on Anna and her red nail theory, which is yet another thing Tom can yell at me about. So, in addition to the way that I pronounce Ferrari and me being small, you're not all that much taller than I am. All right?
No, but I would be like a capital letter, an uppercase letter, and you are literally a lowercase letter. So that's the biggest difference. I also didn't mean to say biggest difference, but you know.
I have never been so insulted in my life. Am I at least an italicized lowercase letter? Please?
Like maybe. I haven't thought about that yet. I'll let you know.
On that note,
No. Of Anna constantly being bullied by Tom.
On that note, thank you so much for listening to this very chaotic episode of Chaos in the Paddock.
Put the chaos on chaos on the paddock.
You can find me at Silly Little Racing on all social media. Tom, where can they find you?
So I am Delta Tom FP1 on TikTok. That's the best place to find me for sure.
And I am Racing Rambles on TikTok, which is generally where I am the most active, or I am race.rambles on Instagram, and I promise I will try to post more there, but it might just be the same cross-posted content.
And obviously, go follow Chaos in the Paddock to keep up with motorsport news and have just some motorsport fun with all the rest of the chaotics. I'll see y'all later. Bye, guys.
Bye.